All right, everybody. It is Tara Boothby, Tony Zerbin, Jaryn, Weir, and Kayla. It's just Shackleton, right? Do you go by Shackleton these days?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. And this is actually part of our little supervision group. So these guys, I don't know why, but I get to be in charge of them a little bit in their professional growth right now. And we've been having a great time together. We like consulting and just enjoying with each other. So today we've been speaking about big feelings. Big feelings. What's going on with big feelings when we're meeting with clients, little guys, big guys, grown-ups, children, however we view them, couples, teens. How are we supporting people? What do we think is really working to help people deal with their big feelings? So what do you guys think? Anybody want to go first?
I'll jump in. I'll go first.
There you go. I knew it'd be Tony. I was like,
so one of the things that really comes up for me in my practice with people, as well as just my own personal life, when it comes to big feelings, is getting a sense of how big, because it's not just I am angry, but how angry am I? And also sense of space too, right? There's this idea in trauma work and in nervous system research that talks about being concerned about things being too much, too fast. So I want to share something with you that came up in our supervision. I came across this in a study from some of the Scandinavian countries, and they asked 1,000 participants to mark down where they felt emotions and how intense they felt their emotions in their bodies. This is a snippet of about 14 emotions they did. So this is more manageable though. And really what I want to share with you that's had so much value for me is thinking about the fact that, hey, how much of my body is available to hold this emotion, right? If we look at anger in this share, there's a lot of intensity there, but not a lot of space. And anger is often described as a volcano or a pressure cooker. You could look at happiness and say, wow, there's a lot of intensity there, but there's a lot more space for it there too. So this is another way I like talking about emotions and saying, hey, if you got big emotions, can we make more space for them? And if you've got a really big emotion, I like asking also, how big is that emotion? Or how hot is that emotion, right? Because if you feel 100% afraid or 100% angry, that can be really overwhelming. But we can sometimes slow down and say, you know what? I actually only feel 70% afraid right now. And your nervous system finds out a meaningful number. And hey, maybe I feel 70% afraid and I might feel 10% angry. And what on earth? Suddenly we've got two emotions. So this is a way where we can get more detail to play with. And when we have more detail to play with, life can feel a bit more manageable. It feels like we're not being overwhelmed all the time. So this is a way of cutting things down to size and making them more manageable.
That's awesome, Tony. And I love that with that slide, anger, disgust, sadness, fear, happiness. Am I missing one?
Anger, fear, disgust, happiness, and sadness.
Sadness. Those are like the real core emotions, right? Like that goes back developmentally to like some of our earliest real emotional experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So pretty important. That's powerful. Yeah, and cool to see the intensity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about like Kayla, Jaryn, any sort of thoughts or questions when you see Tony's slide about intensity, how it's in our body?
Well, I think piggybacking on to how Tony had mentioned, the intensity, being able to identify whether it's a big emotion or a small emotion, because let's be honest, most emotions are quite interconnected. There might be a pretty prevalent one. However, there can be smaller underlying ones that are going on too. So taking the time to really slow down and hone in on to whether it's a big feeling, a small feeling, and then also identifying it with what's going on in the situation. Is it a big problem that this big feeling is coming up, or is it a small problem that these big feelings are coming up? And moving forward from that is from having that awareness of what those feelings are, the size, the intensity, the duration, and then how do we move forward in supporting supporting with those feelings and honoring where you're at.
Yeah, and that's some of why we started talking about big feelings was Kayla was actually the one that was like, hey guys, like can we talk about this? And what I like about what you're saying too, Kayla, is it's really interesting. If we're trying out strategies, we're trying to figure out behaviorally, how can I cope with my feeling or my distress, something that I want a better coping tool with. It's nice to start with a smaller problem. So if I can identify this is more manageable, this is a problem that maybe I could use this new coping tool with. The more we practice with the smaller problems, the more we can, eventually tackle the bigger ones. Yeah, awesome. Cool. So what about you, Jaryn? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on too, like I find often when we have big emotions or even smaller emotions, we are more inclined to, shoving them under the rug or putting them aside, or they're too big, or it's too much right now and I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to handle it or manage it. And so we often turn to distractions, right? So that we don't have to address it right now. And so there can be healthy distractions, but there can also be unhealthy distractions. And as I think about, the current state that we're in this world still, like, I think there are a lot of big emotions going on. And so I think when we come to therapy, it's that chance to really slow down and kind of bring up those emotions again. And how is that for you? And just like Tony was mentioning, like, where do you notice that in your body, and how big is it, or how small is it? And is it shifting? Is it turning into a different emotion? Or yeah, it's just a great time to like slow down and actually address them and feel them fully. So
yeah, and I think too, like with our ability to come together and share a couple hours as a group every 2 weeks, we do this right now. It is a time where we get slow and everybody gets a pocket of time, and we just really notice and talk about something that is inspiring or challenging. And it's the exact same thing that Jaryn is mentioning, is like when we remove the distractions, we set a meeting and then we get slow. Mm-hmm. It's so powerful to see. It's like, oh, that's not that difficult. I could maybe try that one. I can knit that into what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you raise a really good point too, Jaryn. It's like, how are we noticing the social climate right now? 2022, Omicron, Coco Loco. How are we noticing all this stuff?
Yeah, and then even in terms of like, unhealthy distractions or healthy distractions, like healthy distractions might be more, engaging in self-care. Like, how do we look after ourselves when we are feeling those emotions? But maybe an unhealthy distraction might be, scrolling on social media, or it may feel like it's a breather in that moment, but maybe ultimately it is kind of putting things under that rug and not addressing them.
Mm-hmm.
I want to tag on to something there, because Kayla said something earlier that just blew up for me, and I love what you're saying here too. And I just want to shine a light again on what Kayla said, is we can have big problems and small emotions about those big problems. We can have big problems and big emotions, or small problems and big emotions, or small and small, right? And if we have big problems with big emotions, that's normal, that's appropriate. If we have big emotions about small problems, hey, we're human, it happens. But what do we do that actually works for us at that point? If the emotion feels too big to hold in your body, and goodness knows that happens, this is a wonderful place to reach out to another person who can help you hold that emotion, right? If you think about your cup flowing over, well, if you pour a little bit into somebody else's cup, you both can feel okay, right? And whether it's a friend that can hear you out, a parent, maybe it's a teacher, maybe that's a place where you can land. Maybe it's your therapist, right? As therapists, our job is to grow our cup so we can hold a lot of stuff for a lot of people and not be overwhelmed by it. And heck, emotions, they come and they go, but in the middle of it, it really helps to have somebody to just be there with you, share that space, and ride out that emotion. And when it's Smaller, when it's small enough to work with, we can move it through. It doesn't have to stay. It's not like, well, I'm 100% angry for the rest of my life. No, it comes and goes. So I just want to make an answer.
I'm glad you brought that back, because you know what? I think for me personally, Tony, whether it's good for anybody else, that was good for me to get slow with what Kayla had said. Because I don't think I quite absorbed it as much as I did now that you brought our attention back to it. And that's some of, again, just what we're talking about with trying to figure out what to do with big feelings. How do I get slow? How do I listen? How do I think? How do I read? How do I just notice? You know, what's working for somebody else? What are they saying? What's worked for me in the past? That was good. Excellent modeling. Excellent modeling.
And it's okay to normalize those feelings. All feelings are valid, and you're entitled to have those feelings. That's a human emotional response. It's knowing that you're not alone when you're having those feelings. You don't have to be alone. That power of connection, and being able to have that safe place that somebody else can walk with you alongside. Beautiful. On those big feelings.
Yeah. I think that's too, when somebody comes to therapy, often is like, when I heard you saying that list, Tony, of like, here's people that we could co-regulate with, or we can borrow some of their energy from, love energy, is our spouse, you know, like that's hopefully what we get married for, is to have a person that we can go to. And then when we realize, or when it becomes unbearable that we can't, I feel like I'm not able to co-regulate. I'm not able to get my needs met from this person. And that's a time when somebody's like, wow, I'm alone. And that alone experience, that big, little, big problem that we all have our own version of. So pretty powerful to notice how our emotions connect into our attachment system.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So any other thoughts just on this piece? I have so many different things that I'm thinking about just right now, but I'm wondering if somebody else has something that you're sort of feeling inspired for.
I mean, me always. I'll make space. Kayla, that idea about normalizing, goodness. I did a few sessions just yesterday alone. Particularly the emotion of shame. That's one we never talk about, and that's why I like talking about it. But the truth is your nervous system gives you your emotions, and if we shut down our emotions, we shut down part of ourselves. Shame comes and it goes. It can grow in intensity and it can shrink, but it's at least part of the experience of shame is just our nervous system responding to our circumstances, our understanding of reality. And that's normal. It's part of us. It's not a bad thing. It's not good. It's not bad. Anger, it's not good. It's not bad. It can move us. What we do with there, we can have different conversations there. But the emotions themselves, our nervous system gives them to us. They're not good. They're not bad. They can be useful.
It's how we're wired. That wiring, the good and bad. And when you talk about shame right now, Tony, and it totally fits when we're talking about big feelings. We don't often notice that we experience shame emotionally.
Yeah.
Which I think is really important. It's actually, I mean, if we notice it and maybe just think of it as a feeling, that can be helpful, because that's really predominantly how we first or most experience shame.
Usually it comes in relationships because it's a very social emotion. But my goodness, think about it this way. Have you ever been alone and you stub your toe and you cry out in pain? Yeah, that's the first thing you do. And then right on the heels of that, did anybody see me do something really stupid? And I'm feeling the shame in the moment. And it's like, what the heck? But you're feeling it. Your nervous system gave it to you. You catch your breath. A minute later, it moves through. You say, bye, shame.
Yeah, it has a very primary place for us. And so then it connects more powerfully with some of our fears about relationships, which just makes sense from an emotionally focused point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I don't know, any thoughts? Okay, it's pretty strange out there. I feel good about 2022. But it's the climate with us all emotionally is strange. I don't know what are you guys noticing? Kids, grown-ups, people that you're in relationship with, how are people doing?
I think it's a different sense, at least from what I'm seeing with the clients that I'm working with. It's that uncertainty, right? And we know that change is tricky, and that uncertainty is that change, that ever evolving change. So there's lots of different emotions. There's that uncertainty feel in the air that when you're really attuned to individuals, you start feeling what that uncertainty, that angst, that nervousness, scared, anger, like all those underlying and interconnected feelings going on.
Yeah, so just a lot. And I think too, like Kayla, you work mostly with kids or with kids. So that's important for us big people to realize, like, the kids they're all of that intensity. That Tony, those beautiful images that you showed us, Tony, these little beautiful little beings, and they're so full of this intensity. And they don't necessarily have the language.
No. No, and their caregivers are trying their best, but it's that co-regulation piece, right? With all that uncertainty going on. And then it's quite mixed emotions, but that excitement of the new year too. So there's lots of underlying emotions and feelings going on right now.
I think the mom life thing for me, I love what you're saying, Kayla. And when I saw a meme, and it's something to the effect of, like, when your kids like chew you out and tell you what a loser you are, don't take it personally. They're having a hard time. And I know this, my kid's not giving me a hard time, my kid's having a hard time, I know all this stuff. And then my kid does this thing, yells at me, tells me I'm a bad mom, whatever, and I'm like white knuckling it, trying to not react because they're having a hard time. But it's so hard. It's so hard to come alongside and be in charge of those little people full of all that intensity.
And it's hard for the little people to understand the current circumstances too, right? As adults, we're trying to make sense of it all. But I can't imagine what it's like for the little ones, right? Who have a hard time already trying to identify their emotions and process that, or with the help of an adult. But
yeah. And then how about the big people? Like, how are we noticing big people? How are we doing? Like, I do feel better coming into 2022, but I took time over Christmas. I rested.
Yeah.
But like, how is it stepping into this brand new year? Are we noticing ourselves, or a lot of people who are like, this is just same shit, different day? Or is there more, or do people have hope? Are people done with listening or trying, and everybody's just like, sort of like, whatever, give me COVID? Sorry, I'm not trying to be like strange, but I just don't know. It's like, how are people more hopeful? Are they more frustrated? Maybe not quite giving up. That's not the question I'm looking for.
What I noticed this past Christmas season before we went on break is that people had a different kind of weariness than they did the year before. And we've been going through this for a long time now, even for adult timescales. This is becoming a long time. And it's been constant change. Where are the goalposts? What do we trust? Who do we trust? And I think in the midst of that, the fewer solid anchors you have individually, like traditions, practices, beliefs, you name it, the more overwhelming I think what we're going through is becoming for people. And I'm looking for myself personally, saying, hey, you know what? I put on a brave face, but it's been a while. There is this background fatigue. And what are my anchors? What are my practices? Where am I starting to slip in the ways that I take care of myself? Because sometimes my attention is the first thing that slips. And then it's a month later, I look back and I say, I let go this past month. And I'm in over my head.
Mhm.
So how do I crawl back out? And I can imagine there's a lot of other people who are just trying to get through that Christmas hustle and bustle. And now that we're on the other side, it's like, ugh, how do I pick myself back up?
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you, those anchors, like again, speaking with people who are working from home and you lose your anchors, it's not like, oh, Friday, drive through Timmy's in the morning, or, like it's go for a walk on my lunch break at work, or whatever, whatever little self-care things that we were doing that we didn't realize we were doing. Yeah, so those anchors and traditions, that's like that. The landscape of who am I guess, is part of what you're noticing. What do you think, Jaryn, Kayla? Any sort of thoughts on how us big people are doing?
I think it ties back to how Jaryn had previously mentioned that importance of that self-care piece, right? That intentional self-care piece. Now that we're noticing, like Tony had mentioned, that he's feeling like that's lacking. So having an intentionality about self-care, and how are you going to be able to have those practices that maybe you're not able to working from home? How are you going to purposefully have intentionality behind putting, being self-compassionate and also finding time to engage in that self-care?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like with the world being so uncertain, it's like, what's that one thing that can make us feel like is our anchor, right? What's that anchor for each of us? And maybe that anchor, maybe it's hard to identify, and that's okay. Or maybe it is self-care. Like that's one thing that I can consistently rely on. Like I'm gonna take my bubble baths, or I'm gonna, go for a walk, or even just grabbing like a cup of coffee. Like it's something small, right? Can help to anchor us. Yeah. And there's that idea too of like micro and macro self-care. So macro self-care is like, oh, I'm going to book a vacation, or I'm going to book a massage. It's something you typically look forward to, like in advance. But micro self-care, it's like, what can we do in this moment? Like I have 5 minutes right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed because I have all these to-do lists. And so I'm actually just going to do a deep breathing exercise, or I'm gonna, make another cup of coffee, or I'm just gonna step outside and just like breathe in that fresh air. And maybe it's those little things that we need to like cling to help us get through. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like that micro and macro. That's a great way of saying it. And then this is not a thing as far as I know, but what I'm thinking about right now is not only the self-care and that anchoring in, but then what we've really had we're starved for co-regulation. Even if I get more co-regulation than most people, because I get to do some in-person sessions and I get to see some people, but there's some people, it's just that co-regulation starve. So it's this tribal care.
Yes.
So we're sort of noticing this. What is my tribe care? What I belong to me, and to whom else do I belong to? Beyond just my little cohort of my family, whom do I belong to? Yeah.
And who helps fill up my cup too?
Yeah.
Right. Having those intentional people that you surround yourself with that do help you during those times.
Yeah. And then those people that provide a corrective experience for us. Like I think even for us, and we're missing Tanya and we love having her here with us too, but this is kind of our tribal care. Like this thing that we do, it's like, it is cup filling. Yeah. And that's what I love in this conversation as well. I think a modeling is people who are listening can hear that affection and admiration, that knowledge of each other, and that, oh, wow, I love how you said that. And thank you for sharing. So beautiful. Any closing sort of thoughts or messages?
I think even just for people that are struggling out there, and that are feeling hopeless. I had a client say the other day, it's beautiful. Like you just take it moment by moment or day by day, right? And just being okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look for the beauty. Tony's image of the intensity.
Yeah.
It looked beautiful too. Like there's this thing that we're wired this way because there is something beautiful about it, embracing how our nervous system is wired.
So I'm going to tag right there. I'm just going to share it again. I'll try to make sure we also have that link from one of the studies.
Yeah, please do.
So people can look more into it. But just tagging off of what Jaryn was saying there too, is taking it moment by moment, because we can front load ourselves with emotion if we try to do our whole week in a 5-minute checklist. If we try to do our whole week at once, we're going to be overloaded. Sufficient for each day is its own worry, an old saying goes. So it's like, hey, if the next 3 days feel too much, let's scale it back. What can I do for today? What can I do right now? And what are the practices that keep me? And what practices do I need to keep for those practices to keep me? I think that's one of my big takeaways too.
And I think also, sorry, Tara, I think also to know that you don't have to do this walk alone, and we're not actually meant to do this walk alone. So find your village.
Absolutely.
Or find our village. Come to our village and we'll help.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And then Tony, can you say that one more time too, that like about your priorities?
About the practices or the...
Yeah, make practice my priorities, how you
said about the practices that keep us, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Viktor Frankl, saying that the people that made it through some of the worst times of World War II and the concentration camps, he asked them what one of the things was that allowed them to make it through the absolute worst experience you can live through. And they said, well, and he was commenting on them being Jews and unholding the Sabbath. And they looked at him and he said, we didn't hold the Sabbath. The Sabbath held us. Right? And I think in this, what can for many people be the vagueness of a misty pandemic without any milestones, it's really taking a moment to say, what practices hold me? And am I making sure I'm holding those practices?
Beautiful. And that's, I think, too, the word Sabbath fits right now with everything that we're talking about with that. Find your tribe or find our tribe. Get slow, just this where is our space? And those real milestones that we used to have. We knew what Monday was and what Friday was and what Sunday was, and now it's like, when did I wash my hair? I washed mine this morning, by the way. But sometimes I'm like, when did I wash my hair? All right, you guys, this is lovely. So fun. We always have a good time anyhow, whether that we push record or not. This is the first time, and I might force you guys to do it again. All right. Blessings from Sojourn. Peace be with you.